Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I'm very excited about this panel. My name's Leah Walker. I'm the lab director at the Berkeley Risk and Security Lab, which is a lab at UC Berkeley focused on the intersection of national security and technology analyses. I'm very excited for this panel today, AI-enabled cybercrime, separating hype from reality. We have a fantastic slate of panelists, and we'll get into a conversation going into a little bit more detail about how AI is actually changing dynamics on cybercrime, both on the offense and the defense side of things, as well as, a little bit of hype breaking, which we all like to do. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Gil Baram, who is a non-resident research scholar at my lab at UC Berkeley, by Helena Yixin Huang, who's an associate research fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore, and by Derek Manky, who's the chief security strategist and the vice president for global threat intelligence at Fortinet. Today's panel is going to go for about 35 minutes, and we'll save plenty of room for you to ask us any questions you may have. So as we go through the subjects, please do feel free to think about what you might want to ask, what sort of conversations you might want to continue, and then you'll be able to come up to the mic that's over there on the right, probably your left, and ask us any questions. So to begin, I want to turn to our panelists, have them give a bit of an introduction to themselves, and we'll kick off the conversation. So Derek.
Hello, good morning. It's good to see everybody here, especially on the last day of RSA. So Derek Manky, I've been 21 years at Fortinet. I lead our global threat intel team. So they're following the threat landscape for a better part of 25 years. And this, I'm also very excited for this panel because this, obviously, you walk around the show here at RSA, can't get away from AI. It's everywhere. There is a lot of hype on it. We're always looking from an attacker's point of view. And so, I'm really looking forward to the conversation. We just released our threat landscape report at Fortinet, which has some insights into this as well, on pragmatic use of AI, what we're seeing on the dark web and so forth, and I know we'll get into some of those discussion points today. So I'm very looking forward to it, and thank you for attending again.
Fantastic. Helena.
I am Helena. Thanks for coming here and taking time out to join us today. So I'm a researcher at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. I know it's quite a mouthful. I focus mainly on policy research, and I look at digital impact, or how digital technologies impact our society, cyber, as well as digital crime and cybercrime. So I'm really excited for this panel because we have a unique mix. We have someone from the private industry, we have policy researchers, and we have academia. So we are really looking at AI and cybercrime from different perspectives, which is not something that usually happens. So thank you for joining us today.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Gil Baram. I'm a non-resident research scholar at UC Berkeley and a senior lecturer at Bar-Ilan University. And I think for many years I've been looking at state actors, cybersecurity, cyber operations, from different aspects. And in the past couple of years, with the rise of AI, it started to become more interesting and more dynamic. And I'm very happy about this panel. As Derek and Helena mentioned, I think we're working together to look at the same thing from different perspectives, and glad to share, the insights from an ongoing research that we have. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you to, once again, all of the members of the audience and to the panelists. And yes, there is a lot of hype and lots of myths about AI and cybercrime. And I feel like the hype around this has just increased over the past few years. One of the common myths that we hear is that we need to worry about these very exquisite Terminator or Skynet style systems that are autonomously going to hack systems without human involvement, when in reality what we're seeing right now on the ground is much more human-led cybercrime that utilizes certain machine learning or AI tools, for example, phishing and evasion tools, but these are not systems that are thinking like a human, like a hacker, and they're not systems that are operating on their own. We also hear a lot about the idea that AI attacks are unstoppable and that the introduction of AI and machine learning into cybercrime will make it so that defenders can't fight back. That is not at all what we're seeing on the ground, and we'll get into that a little bit further in this discussion. But in reality, AI-driven defenses are also improving. And so the offense-defense balance is that's not a far gone conclusion that offense will win out. There are still very useful applications, particularly in fraud detection, that allow defensive companies and defensive players to respond to the rising tide of cybercrimes. And so with that, I do want to turn to Derek and ask you about the current state of AI-enabled cybercrime, particularly how you're seeing it being used, what you're most concerned about at Fortinet, and where you're seeing an advantage for defenders.
Sure. So, I gave a talk here at RSA, I think in 2018 or 2019 on offensive automation, right? It was the first indicators of multi-stage attacks we were seeing, but it's very basic. It wasn't intelligent, right? So you had things like Autosploit, which was taking Metasploit data and Shodan information, so it was some basic matchup of an attack surface and scripted, really, just to augment some cycles for the cybercriminal or researcher and pen tester. So that was the state 5-6 years ago. Of course, this doesn't happen overnight. We saw GPT and large language models obviously become main stage and widely accessible 2-3 years ago. It's not an instant switch overnight. Cybercriminals are, my point of view, opportunistic, right? They follow a path of least resistance for most of the time until there is resistance, right? And as there's a lot of more defensive solutions put in to help the SOC analysts and so forth, that barrier is getting a little bit higher for them. So now we're just starting to see in the last year or so some weaponization of artificial intelligence. So that's occurring just to set the stage. It's not, again, the Skynet. It's not the fully autonomous hacking. It's not the swarm bots. We talked about theory in that in the past, but it's really an augmentation tool, just like it's being used for the blue team, right? Just for the NOC or SOC analyst. That's the reality. There are examples, though, so this is what I'm a bit worried about. So it's a good news, bad news situation, I think. The good news is that we're not there yet for the autonomous attacks. The bad news is they're starting to implement this now. So it's going to be very interesting, I think, a year from now when hopefully we sit on another panel and talk about this and finish the rest of our tabletop exercises and research. There are examples already of tools like Fraud GPT, Worm GPT, which are GPTs taken essentially offline, right, into cybercriminal use. Why? Because there are no ethical restrictions. It's fully in their control. It's not like OpenAI and ChatGPT and all the other boundaries that are put in. So the development of that is going to be really interesting to follow. Of course, those tools are being used to craft regional, language phishing, spear phishing emails. There's other examples we see like blackmailer. So it's like extortion kits basically for sextortion, for CEO fraud, those sorts of things that are real, actually being sold on dark web. We also see other types of new services that are being offered on the dark web. So there's some tooling that's being used by cybercriminals right now. There's also like Evil Proxy, which is a way to basically set up proxies to get phishing sites for banks and things like that, even using AI in that case to do MFA, so multi-factor authentication, targeting that, trying to intercept credentials. So things that an attacker would manually have to do before is now being augmented basically by cybercriminals.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's important to talk through, as you said, what actually incentivizes cybercriminals to start using certain tools. And we saw this previously in the rise of ransomware, where we really saw the start of the ransomware epidemic was when ransomware as a service came online. And the barrier to entry lowered, and the amount of money that your return on investment as a cybercriminal could really dramatically increase. And that was, a large incentive for a lot of the cyber criminals we saw join in. And so to that end, I want to turn to you, Helena, to hear your perspectives on how you're seeing the cybercrime marketplace in the Indo-Pacific and the Asia-Pacific specifically, how you're seeing AI reshape cybercrime as a service, and also how you're seeing it used in social engineering and targeted fraud.
Yeah, so within, I would say, the Asia-Pacific region, that's a really interesting region to look at. So thanks, Leah, for asking.
Of course.
Yeah. It's actually an area where you have a lot of countries, there's non-homogeneous culture, and you get an uneven level of cyber capabilities and public awareness on AI. So in fact, that region has been called the playground for cybercrime. And no thanks to the amount of scams that's happening from that region as well. So one of the things that I've noticed that in our research is how cybercrime as a service, how CAS, the ecosystem is changing within APAC. And we are seeing threat actors offer more sophisticated tools and services powered by AI. And for example, AI can be used to enhance botnet capabilities, making them slightly more resilient. And they're now capable of launching larger and more complex DDoS attacks. And this together, coupled together with the lowering of technical barrier through AI and the dark web, it means that less sophisticated actors can now launch more impactful attacks, and it's harder to capture them, and at a cheaper rate. So as of last year, hackers offer DDoS attacks on dark web for as low as $10. And that pricing, of course, depends on the security level of your website. If it's a premium protected website, then it goes up to about $170 for 24 hours. And that, to be honest, is still pretty affordable. It's not too expensive. Happening within the APAC region, together with how AI is being used to supercharge cybercrime, we also see that AI has been used to drive social engineering and targeted fraud in the region, especially when you're talking about exploiting the widespread use of social media within the APAC region. So we have, or rather not we, but I would say APAC has more than 2 billion social media users, and every user probably owns several social media accounts, right? TikTok, Facebook, Line, WeChat, X, Red, and if you can name it, that's probably some user in it in APAC. And these are all data. So AI is being used or can be used, to analyze and meticulously profile the different users and individuals based on their online activity, identifying their soft spots. Are they like at an age where they are concerned about the cost of retirement? Perhaps that can be a push factor, right? And they might then find themselves clicking on, I would say, scams that are more related to investments. So that's an example. And there's a soft spot and a life concern, and AI is then being used to craft highly personalized scams. And this is particularly effective in APAC because we get different varying levels of digital literacy and awareness. And from a societal and anthropological point of view, many of us, I think including here in the audience, we grew up being taught seeing is believing, right? But we are no longer at a point in life where seeing is believing. Seeing something, a scam, doesn't mean that it is believable and it should be believed. There's no clear line between the two, and it basically changes the way we interpret and interact with the information that we see. And this also then, spills over to BECs, right? So business compromise emails, they're a large, I would say, common type of cybercrime. And they can use AI to mimic the different communication styles and to predict, I would say, moments, for fraudulent transactions to happen. And reports have basically indicated a rise in sophisticated phishing emails that exhibit, for example, improved grammar, flow, personalizations in local languages, and which actually basically suggests the use of AI to generate the content. And well, of course, I have to bring this up, deepfakes. If we all remember, there was a case last year which a construction company lost more than 25 million to a deepfake video conference because the employee basically believed that everyone in the video conference were his real colleagues, right? So this is also a sign in which AI is being used.
Excellent, thank you. And I think, so fantastic insights, and I think it's really good to talk about the two different resource sides of cybercrime. So that was a really helpful deep dive into some of the lower resource cybercrimes that we're seeing. But Gil, I want to turn to you because you do quite a bit of research on the other scale of resource in terms of the role that nation states and nation state-backed criminals play in this space. So I'd love to hear more about that, specifically how you're thinking about nation-state cybercrime capabilities out of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, and also the differences in how resource availability changes implementation of AI cybercrime tools coming from that tabletop workshop that we did.
Great. Thank you so much. So, yeah, I think building on what Helena and Derek said, I think first of all, when we look like in a global perspective, I think we still see that when it comes to AI-enabled cybercrime, we don't see new techniques yet. We don't see something coming out of the blue and that surprised us all. We see the same techniques, but just getting better, more sophisticated, more targeted, and as Helena mentioned, seeing is believing. Yes, I think it's a great point because it's hard to trust what we see today, and we see that if we look, for example, at Iran. So for many years it was relatively easy to identify spear phishing coming from Iran because of the language, because of the mistakes in the language itself. And now it's getting much harder, thanks to AI translation, which makes the spear phishing much more accurate, much more believable. And we don't see these mistakes from Farsi to English or to Hebrew. We don't see these mistakes anymore, right? So it makes these, and this is just an example, but it makes this spear phishing much more believable and reliable. And we also see in China and Russia how they use AI especially for their information operations. And before the last elections in the US, the US intelligence agency warned about Russian use of AI to accelerate and to improve its attempts to influence the elections. And it's not specifically just in the US, but in many other countries as well. So we see same tactics, but just getting better and better. And if we think about North Korea as well, so I think we all heard in the past couple of months about North Korean IT workers that now can write perfect resume and perfect cover letters, and by using AI. And this use doesn't require a lot of technological understanding, right? Because we know how easy these tools are for use, and we just see these nation states hackers using them in pretty easy and cheap ways, and just getting their techniques much better, larger in scale and scope, and being actually just much better, and making us the defenders, making our job harder to defend, harder to identify and to understand what we're dealing with, because everything looks so reliable and real.
It's a force multiplier as well. I mean, the commodity is real. There's so many examples. Combo lists, which are like stolen credentials that are sold on dark web. They're basically a dime a dozen. I mean, we're talking about $100. You can get hundreds of millions of credentials that can easily be stuffed into scripts, yes, but now also AI engines too. Yeah, and so you have this complication of that force multiplier, where it's a commodity and it's a low barrier of entry for anyone wanting to launch an attack and get access to those tools, or do it turnkey through an investment through the readily available crime services too.
And are you seeing changes in the cybercrime market because of all this?
Yeah, for sure. My experience, it's so cyber criminals, they run a business, right? So it's always an inverse model of any legitimate business. They do dev, they do tooling, they create the tools, they test them, right? They'll use them in their own attacks. And again, if we look at, most cybercriminal organizations, again, 10 years ago, they were more monolithic. So there was like one organization launching their own attacks. It was like they ran their own campaigns, right? So they went through their entire attack chain, premeditating, knowing what they're doing, launching the attack, whether it's a ransom attack or extortion or whatnot. Now it's a business, right? So they have business units, and the business units are fragmented, and they're operating on different parts of that attack chain. So it's become a much more diverse environment, and that's changing the marketplace too, right? So if you look at the marketplace now, and anytime a technology comes in place, they'll weaponize it, test it, and then sell it. So we saw that with ransom as a service. That was 15 years ago, and it's still a prolific model today. DDoS as a service, as you said, phishing as a service, because they were doing those attacks. But now we see reconnaissance services like social media. That's a treasure trove of information just sitting out there, waiting to be scraped from, again, these GPTs that they're creating that can then be used in these attacks and sold, of course, for a service. So it is changing. It's just expanding. There's more services being offered like that. We're seeing some of it, not a lot right now, but like deepfake services as well. And it's almost a formula, right?
And I think one interesting point that came up in the tabletop exercise that we had at Berkeley was that it looks like even like regular criminals starting to find cybercrime very attractive because the ease of use and how accessible GPT is, and that today they don't need much of technological understanding in order to make some profits, right? So it's a low level operations, right? But still, the cybercrime become very attractive, much more than before the use of AI.
Yeah, so adding on to what Derek and Gil mentioned, so even if we look at cybercrime, ransomware as a form of cybercrime as a service, it actually costs a lot lesser now to run it. So in the past, if we look at the traditional ransomware many years ago, you need capabilities and you need people who know how to hack, how to encrypt, how to decrypt. But given the current state of ransomware, you also get a lot of, even if you pay me, it's not because you are paying me for me to decrypt your information and return it to you. It's because you have a fear, and I have threatened you that if you don't give me the money, I'm going to release this information and harass someone in your social circle. So that essentially also decreases the cost of running cybercrime activities.
The playbook is shifting as well too. So just sorry to pull on that thread a little bit more. It's that's also we're seeing more aggression, but now with the use of the tooling, it's they can be more efficient with that as well. One other thing that's popped into mind as well is the initial access brokers. That's another example of that fragmentation I was talking about. It's not new. It's been a couple of years now, but that's something again that is being put into toolkits basically, right? Instead of doing a whole monolithic operation, they're just focused on penetration and then selling access, so Active Directory credentials, those sorts of things to the aspiring buyer. And we're talking auctions of typically 1 Bitcoin, which Bitcoin's expensive, of course, now, but we're talking access to systems, organizations that are north of $1 billion in revenue, right? Annual revenue.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful framing. One quick follow-up on that, Derek. Could you talk a bit more about the research and development side of these tools? Because there's a few actors who are actually putting the time and have the technical talent to build out these tools that are then being commoditized.
Yeah, it's a good question. We still don't. So these are the things that actually come up in the tabletop exercises. Also, Cybercrime Atlas with the World Economic Forum, we're doing research on this too. It's on the development side, it's not as big as you would think, right? Because again, most of the action, most of the players, that lion's share of cyber criminals is on the services end, right?
Yeah.
Because again, it's where you have all the affiliates, that middle layer. the volumetric side. From the development side, as Gil was saying, there's not a lot of novel techniques. We're actually seeing the opposite, like less zero-day burning, and we're seeing more, like focus on zero-day exploit development, more on the living on the land techniques and using existing toolkits that are there. So the focus is really now kind of shifting from a development side. It's interesting, again, it's just like the business again, right? Like we talk about upskilling and up-leveling analysts in the SOC and NOC. The developers from cybercriminals are doing the same thing as well. I mean, they're using these tools to, and again, reality check, we're not seeing AI being used to generate, again, zero-day exploits right now. We're not seeing it being used to generate novel malware. We are seeing it being used to create, JavaScript and things that are put together in the toolkits. And that's what the developers are sort of focused on right now.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And I think just one point about the research and development. I think when it comes to nation states, we have to remember that there is the issue of knowledge transfer between countries, especially between Russia and Iran, Russia and North Korea, right? So if we see one state actor using a certain technique, we should believe that in a couple of days or months we'll find the same techniques used by different state actors as well.
Yes. No, I think that's an excellent point. And as we shift into our conversation about future threats and what we're concerned about, I want you to keep pulling on that thread of nation-state actors, and particularly the challenges now that, because we're seeing that tech transfer and just a general, more intertwined ecosystem of tools, can you talk about how much that complicates attribution?
Yeah. I think, the issue of attribution of offensive cyber operations is a thing for a while, and we've been discussing that for many years. I think at first we thought like, oh no, we cannot do attribution in cyberspace, but that was proven pretty much wrong throughout the years. And now that we can talk about different types of attribution, technical attribution, attribution by law enforcement, and of course attribution by government or political figures. And I think the main problem or the main issue would be, I think, in the technical attribution, because the techniques just got better, right? So, and if you also take into consideration the issue of false flags, right, during the technical analysis of the attack. So I think making the first part of the technical attribution might be harder, but and that will have, of course, consequences on the other parts of the attribution and the naming and shaming part and so on. But I do think we have to remember it's not all bad, right? It's like we're in an ongoing arms race, right? So techniques are getting better, attackers are getting better, but defenders are getting better also.
Yes, and we're seeing we're seeing continued international cooperation, which is really good. So Helena, as you're looking towards the years ahead, how important, well, obviously very important, but if you want to stress how important international cooperation is, but particularly where do you see areas that are really promising for further international cooperation, and what are some lessons learned, the good, the bad, and the ugly from the past few years of international cooperation on cybercrime?
Sure. So one of the areas that I think we need more international cooperation in is definitely information sharing. So we're not just talking about information sharing in terms of like collection and exchange of digital data and transnational law enforcement, because we know that cybercrime has no respect for geographical boundaries, right? So that's where we need our different law enforcements to work together, and they need to share information so they can effectively combat this issue together. Because what happens if, your country A, your perpetrator is in country A, your victim is in country B, and your assets, the stolen assets, are in country C. The law enforcement of these different countries, they need to work together. And what they need to do, they need to share threat intel as well, because we need to think of threat intel as some sort of like a digital fingerprint, right, of the AI-driven attacks. And they can essentially be a part of the defensive strategies taken against cybercrime. So what's discovered in one side of the globe, when shared, can be vital, as a vital warning to the other side of the globe. Another aspect that often we see in APEC as an issue is harmonization of legal systems. So like what I mentioned earlier, sharing of information and especially asset recovery. How do we recover the assets that are now parked in country C? Right, so there needs to be mutual legal assistance and more international collaboration at the government level. And of course, we cannot forget the private sector, which we have a lot of you guys here. I mean, just look at this entire RSA conference. There's a lot of expertise and innovation just residing in the private sector, and the government needs to work with the private sector. Public-private partnership is actually crucial because when you leverage insights and develop like joint solutions against AI-enabled cybercrime, it's an uplifting movement where we engage the entire community with the key and shared objective, of dealing with this problem. And I think that's essential and definitely much needed.
Thank you. And Derek, so looking ahead the next 3 to 5 years, the next 10 years even, how are you thinking about the cybercrime marketplace? What are tools that you at Fortinet are watching, potential evolutions of those tools that you would be concerned about, potential gains in efficiency, or even new actors in the space?
Yeah, so I think I'll put a good note on this because we always talk about the doom and gloom. I think, so first of all, I completely agree with everything that was said. I think the attribution is going to become much harder. That's the bad news. AI is a tool, right? Large language models are a tool. Like any tool, we've seen this with rats, not the rats running around the city, but remote. Is it a remote access tool or a remote access Trojan, right? We've seen this before. We're seeing it now with the abuse of AI as well too. That's the current state. Looking forward 3 to 5 years, I fully expect more development again on their end. We're going to see more services in that chain. I think we're going to see more multi-stage attacks, right? So it's not just the reconnaissance service, not just the deep fake. It's like all of that combined where you can launch a full-scale attack through a SaaS platform essentially, right? So I think that's the concerning thing. When barriers, i.e. the security industry, has more resilience, like you see at the conference here put in place, which is happening now, it's going to happen over the next couple of years, then we're going to naturally see cyber criminals turn to, like nation-state actors, turn to more advanced methods. So that's what I do expect to see, not this year, but in the next 3 to 5 years. Fuzzing, which is something that a zero-day researcher would typically have to do, crashing code, developing exploit for that. I think we will see that's a very advanced use case, so that's further out, we'll see that. Novel payload, malware development, we'll see that too. On the good side, I am actually really excited about this because we're here. We're in this room. Like, cyber criminals don't have conferences like this, right? They might, have a couple people together and post on social media, but not like this. Like, we have the expertise in the industry and the tools are being developed. There's very exciting things happening where we can actually model the attribution. Like MITRE has attack flow, which can be used for machine learning and predictive analysis of attacks through the attack framework. So that's the good news. I think there's a lot of tools at our disposal. We're continuing to do that. I think the work like we're doing on the tabletop exercises through this initiative and the industry in general, we're going to further develop those models. And it's a strength in numbers thing, I think, for our industry. So I think if we get it right, and we are, we're going to have, for the first time, I think, we're sort of at that tipping point, but the first time have an advantage on the defender side as well.
Excellent. Well, that's a lovely piece of good news to look forward to end this. So I now want to move into the Q&A section of this session. So please feel free to line up there are 2 mics actually on both the left and the right side. So if you have questions for us, please come up and just ask them. Please.
So if, as you're looking at AI tools and the such, in your research, have you seen the threat actors using any machine learning or AI tools to determine who to attack, such as they're scraping, we'll just say, external information on certain organizations And is there any information out there that would say certain organizations are more susceptible because, for lack of a better term, they suck at cybersecurity, their basic cyber hygiene isn't there, or some other area? And the reason I ask that is there a way that we as defenders can get that to identify, hey, we are higher priority because of X, Y, Z, A, B, C, et cetera?
So I'll start on that. Great question, thanks. So yes, the short answer is yes, we are seeing that. Again, it's mostly it's a business, so it's attack surface management for them. It's just like, you know, it's a funnel approach where they're taking data. So it's not necessarily they know who to attack originally, right? They're using this data, again, to scrape information, to find what organizations exist out there, maybe potential credentials that they could get from that. Once they have that, then they will launch the attack, right? So sort of this multi-phase approach. So it's not like they have a target in mind initially, it's sort of scraping until they have a candidate, like a short list that they can use to launch that attack. Then of course they go through the attack and they can do, you know, the initial access broker approach and things like that. From the defender's side, absolutely, it's the same game, right? It's a matter of knowing your enemy, knowing the customer, essentially. So using things like EASM, external attack surface management, reconnaissance services, looking at dark web, where these, you know, attacks are being planned or sold on that cyber criminal marketplace. That's sort of the root cause of all of that.
I think I can add to that. You know, when we look at the threat actors, I think for now we don't see that, speaking broadly, okay, that the targets have changed because of AI or not. For example, you know, North Korea is still interested in South Korea and in achieving access to nuclear facilities, for example. So that didn't change, right? And Russia didn't even change, you know, its interest in conducting information operations specifically on divided societies, right? So I think in that sense, the broader targets or that are related to the broader, you know, geopolitical goals of state actors, that did not change just because they're using AI or not, right? But I think once they have the targets, you know, the list of targets, then I think we can talk about exactly what Derek mentioned about how they're being more specific in choosing that.
Yeah, and I'll just add another example of that is the like verticals for cybercrime. Operational technology manufacturing has been the #1 target for ransom now because they're going after services and not data encryption. And that has been a couple of years in a row now, hasn't changed also because of AI.
I have 2 questions. Obviously it's very scary that AI is being used as an accelerant to to increase volume and speed of all of these attacks. And there have been notices, 2 questions. There have been notices recently that a lot of our information's been stolen. So my question is really more along the lines of, what do you do to protect yourself, your family, your associates as a business owner in the event, you know, now that there's all of this information that's out there? So that's the first question.
So it's a tough question. There's you know, this comes down to cyber hygiene in my point of view as well too. It comes down to just awareness that, like you said, these are the targets. If you have information that you're posting on social media that could be used in an attack, obviously PII, personally identified information, it's going to be harvested, right? And it's going to be used in an attack. So I think there's an education, humans are always the weakest link in this, as we say. So there's still definitely a training aspect to this and cyber hygiene aspect. But then it's also, again, if you look at these attacks, it's just, again, it's not novel. It's an accelerant, like you said. So what are they after? Credentials. In the, you know, in our industry, of course, we have multi-factor authentication. We have all those different things we do on the security side, defense in depth, that still very much apply to this as well. Because again, we're not in that case where AI is being used for novel zero-day attacks and things like that. It is mostly the case for scraping information using spear phishing attacks, but it's not going to be a brand new zero-day in that spear phishing attack. So it could be very crafty, and you're going to get a bigger return on investment for people clicking through links, opening attachments, but that's not the end game still, right? There's still a lot of things to do in that defense in depth environment too.
Second question is really, deep fakes are a very scary thing. Are there tools that are being developed or been developed so that we could at least identify what is a deep fake before somebody acts on it?
There are some. I would encourage you to look at another UC Berkeley person. Hani Farid is one of the leading researchers in the space, and he's a professor at UC Berkeley, but he's also building a startup to do more deepfake detection. So at least in my opinion, there's some promising efforts, and there's some companies trying to get started in the space, but it is, I think the challenge there in terms of scaling up and becoming efficient when there is so much improved capabilities on the offensive side. I think the offense-defense balance there is a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I think I just would like to add, and I think it relates even to your first question. I think when it comes to deepfake, in image, voice, I think it really relates to what Derek just mentioned, that the awareness, right? And to think, before we trust the person that we're having a Zoom meeting with, and stop before we trust, the voice that we hear over the phone. So I think it relates to awareness, and we've been talking about awareness forever, but I think now it's even more, the urgency is higher, right? To be more aware in our organizations, but also, to teach our families, your colleagues, just to stop before you click, stop before you say yes to something, because the scale and the precision of the attacks are much higher.
Yeah, no, I'll just say, there is investment being done in the industry. It's a long game, though. That's a whole arms race on its own. It's just like today, we're still going back and forth on CAPTCHAs, right? I mean, deep fakes and the fidelity and the rate of confidence on that model, that's always going to be in flux. That's going to be a big arms race. And it's not just the security industry. Yes, we're seeing in security for like the Zoom thing that you mentioned, and phishing attacks and so forth. But it's also being used in sextortion. It's being used there's copyright cases for Hollywood, even, like all of these different things for. So there's also a strength in numbers and big investment play that's going to be happening there. But again, I think it's going to be a very long end game.
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Eric Hicks with Sanford Burnham Previs. Very nice to meet you all, and thank you for this talk. I have two questions that are kind of AI adjacent almost, so it may be unfair on the face of it, but let's find out. Do any of you have any sense of even broad percentages of victims who pay the ransom in the case of ransomware, and of the ones that do, any percentages on who actually get their data back? Like, what's their effective ROI and success rate specifically for ransomware? Thank you.
I can't give you a percentage. It's quite high, I would tell you. Yeah. Yeah, because, and this is an unfortunate thing again, because obviously we advocate not to pay ransom, but because because it's not these broad ransom cases that are happening, right? Trying to hit, it's not a numbers game. It's become much more targeted. So it's because of that, the efficiency rate, the ROI, the pay. It's a work smarter, not harder approach. Again, they're going after critical services that need to come online within hours. So that really puts the pressure on. It's more aggressive. And so because of that, we're actually seeing volume of ransomware dropping, but it's not a good thing because it is becoming more effective and targeted.
Any comment on, of the people who pay, how likely are they to actually get their data back, or is that hard information to find? Probably hard to find.
I think I don't have numbers, but I have, I think, an interesting anecdote that it depends on the group that did the attack, right? Because I think recent research discussed the importance of reputation for these groups, right? Because they see themselves not as, street hackers. As Derek mentioned, they are businesses, right? And their reputation is important for them. So some of them, they're saying if you pay, we'll give you your data. And they do that because they don't want to be perceived as liars, right? For the next,
Yeah, and
Going back to being a business.
yeah, and of course it's these are cyber criminals, right? So we did a survey about a year ago of over 500 global organizations on ransomware, and the number was high in terms of organizations that have been hit with ransomware that were hit a second or even third time within like a year. So they're going to, once they smell blood, they'll be coming back as well. So that because of that, the number is also, it's not a small percentage, let's say.
Great. One last question.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about WERN GPT and some other types of evil AI that are out there. Basically, they just AI models that have had their guardrails disabled, right?
Yeah.
Is there any work being done to detect, like, when you are hooked up to an evil AI? So if I, go to some place and I start putting in prompts, I'd understand, oh, these messages need to be, these suggestions that are coming back to me need to be taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there is technology being developed for, it's more on the data privacy, DLP, like modern DLP sort of side, but it's more about looking at it's more like the net flow analysis, what models are being used. That's actually becoming very important from, not just for the evil AIs, let's say, those models, but again, more from a data control aspect, right? So it's more about intellectual property and our employees, plugging in documents, like confidential documents from an organization, even into an open model like ChatGPT. So yeah, there is work being done to detect and control use of LLMs.
And then the last question on that is there any standardized guardrails that we should be putting in place as an independent software developer working on an AI model that we hope to put in front of our customers? Is there anything we should do to make sure that our model looks as good as possible and is certified clean, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I would look at MITRE Atlas. So this has been developed by MITRE. It's a framework to look at adversarial threats to AI systems. So it's basically techniques that are being mapped out for attacks on like prompt injection, all those different things on those AI models. It's a good industry framework, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much for the questions. Thank you to the panelists. I'm afraid we're out of time, so we'll have to cut it here, but I think there's many more conversations to be had on this topic. Maybe we'll see you here next year. Certainly it'll be interesting to see the developments that happen over the next year. So thank you so much to Gil, to Helena, to Derek for joining me here today. Thank you to all of you for making time and joining us here for this session. Thank you to the organizers, to the host, the AV. You've been incredibly helpful. And we hope that everyone has a nice rest of their RSA.
Thank you.
Thank you.